Well, hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Mondays with Miko. And I'm sneezing. So, sorry if I sound a little nasal today, but I hope everybody is having a wonderful Monday. And I just got a few things I've been saving up that I want to chat with you guys about. It's some crazy times going on up around here, ain't it? So, I got something to say. So if you're watching this on repeat, I thank you so much. And if you're watching it live, hey, let me know you're out there and then chime in on the conversation. I love to know what you have to say. So the first thing I wanted to talk about, and it's actually great news. 2 weeks ago, when I had Mondays with Miko, let me go ahead and add this to the stream here, see what it looks like. I talked about the Inflation Reduction Act, right? And it has passed. It's passed the House. It's passed the Senate. Interestingly enough, and this is how. So the Inflation Reduction Act. Last time, when I explained to you guys that it's three main pieces. There is an economic piece where our government is going to be trying to collect the money that's owed to the government from people who make over $400,000. Then there's the healthcare piece where people like me who are on Obamacare, this is going to allow us to keep some subsidies that are in place that will keep our insurance rates affordable. And then also prescription drug cost reductions. And so with prescription drug cost reductions, that's where it's going to make it so that those of us that have to pay for prescription insulin and others, the rates would be lower. And then last is the climate change, right? Like I'm dying to get an electric vehicle. I cannot wait to get an electric vehicle, and more information is coming out because I think I told you guys the bill is hundreds of pages. So more and more information is coming out about the bill, like the $4,000 for the electric car. That's for a used car. So that's a subsidy for a used car. I'm not sure how much the subsidy is going to be for a new car, but but that's just all really great, right? And it's exciting and this is because of the Democrats. They don't talk about it, don't know why, they don't toot their own horn, but there's been a lot of positive things that have been happening legislatively, and it's because that the Democrats are in office and some of the moves that they're making, right? And so one of the things that you got to remember is that there's always two sides to the story and the pundits and this and that, but the bottom line is, how does it impact you? How does it impact your individual pocketbook? Who is out there working for the American people, right? And so last week, or 2 weeks ago, when I was going through this whole thing with the Inflation Reduction Act, I said, "Watch, you're going to start to hear lies from Fox News and others saying that this is going to raise taxes. They got to try to find something negative about something that's positive for our country, and it really saddens me because it used to be a time in politics where you win some, you lose some, but at the end of the day, it's all what's for the betterment of the American people, right? So check this out. I just got to play it. It's just a couple minutes, and it was a Fox News. It was not my favorite person, but oh my goodness, why am I forgetting this guy's name? The guy in West Virginia, the senator in West Virginia. Oh, I'm forgetting his name. It's a blank, total blank. But anyway, he's the one that always gets us the trouble. When I play the videos, then I'll know it. Anyway, so this guy is talking to the Fox News host, and the Fox News host is claiming that she read the bill and that taxes are going to go up for people who make less than $400,000. Check this out. It's only about a minute and a half.
Raising taxes when all we're saying is the wealthiest corporations in America, 55 of them pay zero to help this great country of ours, to defend ourselves.
Well, how does this change that? Because that's part of the corporate structuring.
It's a minimum of 15%. The tax rate was at 35% before 2017.
Right.
Then it went to 21%. Mm-hmm. That was a tremendous savings, but that's not good enough, I guess. All we're saying is at 15% minimum, everyone in West Virginia I know, and most people around the country, pay a 21% corporate or greater. So why can't the greatest $1 billion of revenue a year. Why can't they pay at least 15% for this great country?
But $400,000 was supposed to be the cutoff. And I'm reading, and I am reading, Senator.
Let me jump in right here real quick. Harris Faulkner says that she's reading. I don't know what she's reading, but let me read this directly from the bill. No tax increases on certain taxpayers. Nothing in this subsection is intended to increase taxes on any taxpayer with a taxable income below $400,000.
Who's paying any taxes? Who's paying any taxes that doesn't have a corporation that has revenue of over $1 billion a year? Not one person. Not one person, Harris. You're assuming because they'll pass that on. The companies were paying zero.
No. I'm asking a different question than you're answering. I'm saying Americans, $400,000 and below now are going to be taxed. Their taxes are going to go up.
That's a lie. That is a pure outright lie.
So they're
period. Pure outright lie. So we need to have more of that talk, right? And it just is mind-boggling. If somebody is saying something and really they got, Fox News has a huge following. So they say these things, they're flat out lies, and then you get people who they're interviewing that know they're lying and don't flat out say that they're lying. So I don't typically have something wonderful to say about Joe Manchin, but kudos to you, right? For just calling a lie, calling a spade is absolutely ridiculous. But let's talk about just how important, just for a minute, elections are, right? So we have 50 Democrats in the Senate and 50 Republicans in the House. I'm sorry, 50 Democrats in the Senate and 50 Republicans in the Senate. And so that's 50-50, right? That's if all Republicans vote one way and all Democrats vote one way, that's 50-50. The tiebreaker is our vice president. Now, so we typically should win any ties. But this is what happens. Joe Manchin and Sinema, they hold the Democratic Party hostage. So, yeah, finally, Joe Manchin was able to make a deal. And finally, Kristen Sinema was able to make a deal that took something out of the bill that was going to tax the rich. Finally, that happened. But what I'm here to tell you guys is that we shouldn't leave it to two people. We gotta put more blue in the Senate, so that way we can get things passed. So for the betterment of the American people, without having to worry about what one or two people have to say. And so one of the things I'm gonna tell you about is and more, I'm going to be sharing information about a woman who's running for Senate. And her name is, pops up. And her name is Crystal Matthews, right? So right now, on the 50 side of Republican, we have, his name is Tim Scott. So Tim Scott is a Republican. So South Carolina's vote, we got Tim Scott, we got Lindsey Graham. But right now, I'm talking about this race that's happening in November. So South Carolina's vote goes on the Republican side, which is not for the side of working everyday people. Imagine if we do the impossible and actually come out and vote, and we send a Democrat by the name of Crystal Matthews to Washington, D.C., we will be, you see what I mean about changing the world? Because these kind of bills, this bill should have been passed last year. And all of these things would already be enacted and more that should have happened and didn't happen, right? So if we're able to elect people that will vote the way that we need them to vote to help the American people, not only will we change our state, but we'll change our nation and we can change our world. So South Carolina, we have an opportunity to change the world right now. I just had to point that out. But anyway, good news. Congratulations to American people for getting the Inflation Reduction Act passed. It will be signed into law by our president very soon. So let's pivot a little bit. We're going to pivot a little bit. We're going to talk about Trump's world. Is it imploding, y'all, or what? All right. So today there was two. Lindsey Graham, let me tell you what Lindsey Graham did. So after the election, Lindsey Graham, who is the senator in South Carolina, he decides to call down into Georgia And when I asked Georgia, let me tell you, I'm gonna go ahead and read it, and I quote: "This is what came out the court documents. During the telephone calls, Graham questioned Secretary Raffensperger and his staff about re-examining certain absentee ballots cast in Georgia in order to explore the possibility of a more favorable outcome for former President Trump." What he doing calling Georgia? Makes me wonder what's going on with our elections in South Carolina, but that's not what we're here to talk about. So today what happened was his went to federal court. Yeah, his went to federal court. And he went to federal court and says, these people down in Atlanta are trying to subpoena me and I don't want to go. And the federal court said, you better go. Right? And the same thing happened to Rudy Giuliani. So Rudy Giuliani, if you guys can remember, he is the president's attorney, right? We'll throw it off, president's attorney. So he also went to court because in Atlanta, they're saying y'all did some crooked, jacked up stuff, and we want you to come down here and you got to testify. And when you get a subpoena, y'all, it's not an option. Either you show up or the cops get you. But for some reason, this privilege is giving them a little bit of a benefit of the doubt. But I'm gonna just play about a minute and a half of this news report, and then let's talk about it on the other side.
Moments ago, the judge issued a 22-page ruling that reads in part, quote, "The court finds that the district attorney has shown extraordinary circumstances and a special need for Senator Graham's testimony." Question, Paige, is can Senator Graham appeal?
Absolutely. Senator Graham, I think, has already indicated through his office that they're going to continue to challenge this. If so, they have to seek permission to challenge it in front of the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, which is here in Atlanta.
And this is coming as Rudy Giuliani has also been ordered by another Atlanta area judge to appear in person, I believe, this Wednesday before a special grand jury related to the investigation in attempting to overturn election results there in Georgia. He has said that he is not able to attend and cannot travel. What do you expect the judge to do in response to that?
Well, I think Judge McBurney in Fulton County has already suggested to Giuliani that you need to find a way to get down here. I think there's evidence that he's been able to travel to some extent, but regardless, the judge has already considered those arguments and said you're going to have to testify. If you can't fly, drive. If you can't drive, get on a train, whatever you need to do to get down here. But it's important.
Just moments ago, the judge issued a 22-page ruling.
So check that out. So basically what these and if you're joining me on replay, I'm talking about Trump's world kind of imploding right about now. And I just shared a video of a news report where the federal judge has ruled that Lindsey Graham needs to go ahead and testify. You cannot, just squash the subpoena. And the Fulton court judge has told Rudy Giuliani that he needs to get down there and testify, and he needs to go down there and testify with the quickness. Now, these guys, they plotted to overthrow our government. They flying all over the world, all over the country, spreading this baloney and garbage. But when it comes time for them to stand up and to be accountable for what they've done, they make every excuse in the world. Now, Rudy Giuliani, he's delayed it a couple times because he had to get 2 coronary heart stents put in. Now, not underestimating that surgery. It's a really important surgery. Members of my family have had it, but it's an outpatient surgery at this point. So basically, he's got to get on down there. He's got to go ahead, and I'm talking about Rudy Giuliani and Lindsey Graham being subpoenaed to discuss in Atlanta what's going on with the election fraud and their involvement in it from Georgia's perspective, right? So I think that's something to watch out for, y'all. Another thing to watch out for, and these aren't directly related, okay? So I'm just starting to connect some dots personally, is Alex Jones. Did you guys, okay, so Alex Jones is this wackadoo, crazy guy, and he's had these crazy concepts for years, right? And one of the things that this guy has said was that the Sandy Hook's massacre was fake. And so somebody sued him. Two of the parents, they sued him. And there's some more parents that are suing him. So with this guy, though, he was very important in terms of Donald Trump getting elected. He was very much involved in the planning of January 6th and the promoting of January 6th. He is a crazy person. And so what happened was he's being sued by these parents. And in this suit, they're saying, you hurt us. You said some things that are flat out lies, and we're suing you in civil court, right? But there's a connection. So listen to, and it's his cell phone. And on the other side of this video, I'll talk about the cell phone and why it's important.
What does it mean if the messages are in blue? Whose messages are those? Whose phone is this taken from?
I don't know whose phone's taken from. I mean, I turned the phone over and said, take the stuff off.
Can I have you look in the very bottom below the very bottom left corner? Is that your phone number?
Yes. So you did get my text messages. And it said you didn't. Nice trick.
Yes, Mr. Jones.
Oh.
Indeed. You didn't give this text message to me. You don't know where this came from. Do you know where I got this?
No.
Mr. Jones, did you know that 12 days ago, your attorneys messed up and sent me an entire digital copy of your entire cell phone with every text message you've sent for the past 2 years, and when informed, did not take any steps?
Okay, all right. So let's leave that there. So this guy is wackadoo, Alex Jones. He's being sued in civil court for something that's completely different. Well, what he did was his attorneys made a mistake and sent all his cell phone records to the people that were suing him. And check this out, though, for the last 2 years. So that means his text, he was very involved in January 6th. He was in part of the planning. Those text messages now got into the hands of a civil case attorney. And then the January 6th committee asked them for all the text messages. So there's more to come here. These are things I'm telling you guys to watch out for, right? And let me tell you how they monetize. And I've said in other shows, Mondays with Miko shows, is I sympathize with people who are who follow Trump and who have been tricked by Trump, who receive, they send out tens of thousands of email messages, hundreds of thousands of text messages. They've got the fake news, Fox News media. So they're tricking these people, and they're making money. So this guy, Alex Jones, he sells a whole bunch of junk, right? And before Trump, he wasn't making that much money. After Trump, he, on his cell phone, that same cell phone, they found out that he made $800,000 in one day peddling this crap and this fake news. $800,000. He's estimated to be worth $270 million. Okay, so this business of fake news and tricking people is very profitable for some. It's very profitable for some. And if you've been taken in by the Trump shenanigans, there's nothing wrong with being a Republican, in my opinion. It's okay. We're both Americans, Democrats and Republicans. We just got different points of view, different ways of getting to the same answer. But it is not okay to follow people who are scamming Americans, who don't really care about America or Americans, and they have done illegal, crooked things. Politicians go to jail. They do. They've gone to jail in the past, and they're going to go to jail in the present. So let's just prepare ourselves. And, if you've been duped, that's okay. Let's just all move forward, get rid of these crooks, and put our country back together. So another thing I want you guys to look out for, and I am going to put this on the screen, although I know you probably won't see it, but I'm going to read it. Okay, because this is quite interesting. So on July 21st, Melania, because remember, Trump, they always throw something out like in advance. in advance of something happen when they think you're not looking. So on July 21st, this last month, a few weeks ago, Melania Trump tweeted a statement on her Twitter, and I'm going to read it. On January 6, 2021, I was fulfilling one of my duties as First Lady of the United States of America, and accordingly, I was unaware of what was simultaneously transpiring at the U.S. Capitol building. How in the world could that be the case? I'm pausing. I don't know how that was the case. We were all aware of what was happening at the Capitol building. But okay, she was unaware. Then she goes on to say, as with all First Ladies who preceded me, it was my obligation to record the contents of the White House historic rooms, including taking archival photos and all the renovations. Several months in advance, I organized a qualified team of photographers, archivists, and designers to work with me in the White House to ensure perfect execution. As required, when we scheduled January 6, 2021, to complete the work on behalf of our nation. This was a very significant undertaking, requires great care, attention to detail, and concentration, both in planning and execution. Okay, that was paragraph number 2. And so for you guys that are just coming on, this is a statement that Melania Trump put on her Twitter on July 21st. I'm going to keep going. This is when things get kind of suspicious. This is Melania Trump talking. I have always been very supportive of my former Chief of Staff, Stephanie Grisham. I stood behind Ms. Grisham after her failed stint as White House press secretary and welcomed her back to the East Wing. Pause. Donald Trump, every single time this Trump family is done with you, then they throw you under the bus because she's not done. But there's always something else behind it, right? This is what she says. This is Melania Trump speaking. Ms. Grisham was not in the White House on January 6th. Her behavior in her role of Chief of Staff ultimately amounts to a dereliction of duty. Traditionally, the First Lady's Chief of Staff provides detailed briefings around our nation's important issues. In fact, Ms. Grisham failed to provide inside information into the events surrounding January 6th, and she had been in her post in Washington, D.C. This lady was probably scared running for her life, just like you should have been, except for you wasn't because you knew all that was planned. Okay, but this is what she puts in writing and posts to Twitter, just basically going for this girl, Miss Grisham. Then she keeps saying, shamefully, this is Melania Trump talking about Stephanie Grisham. Shamefully, this behavior has only partially become not public knowledge, yet was consistent for Miss Grisham. It's evident that Grisham's recent betrayals are a last-ditch effort to attempt to resuscitate her ruined career and reputation. Who's ruining her career and reputation? And then she says, I always condemn violence. I have been fully informed of all the details. Naturally, so she says, I always condemn violence. Had I been fully informed of all the details, naturally, I would have immediately denounced the violence that occurred in the Capitol building. You didn't have a TV? Was nobody in the White House running crazy while our Capitol was being attacked? And this is how she wraps up this statement. And while Ms. Grisham's behavior is disappointing, it is not surprising or an isolated incident. It is not the first time a former staffer has tried to maintain relevancy and profit by using my name to create a false narrative. And this is signed by Melania Trump in the signature that's suspiciously just like her husband. I find that weird. Who has a signature like that's just like your husband? It's bizarre. But here's the thing that we need to watch out for. She put that out there for a reason. We're going to be learning some stuff. This woman may be testifying in front of the January 6th committee. For Melania Trump to throw her chief of staff under the bus, insult her, and she said, "Oh, she worked for me, and then she went to work for as a press secretary. She failed, so I brought her back." Who does that? Something's up. Watch this. She sent that tweet for a reason. So, Melania Trump, Lindsey Graham, there's some crazy stuff that's happening. I sense an implosion going on in Trump world, right? So please don't get, I'm going to try to, deliver tidbits of it, pieces of it. Hopefully you guys can just hang in there with me. Things that I think are relevant, but it's important that we pay attention. It's important that we stay together as citizens. We all live in these communities together, and as Americans. We cannot let these crooks get away with what they did. And we cannot let fear kind of distract us from what we know needs to be done. So, pivoting to the next topic, and that is Miko's book club. So I'm reading, and it is just so intriguing. The first book is I'm gonna share this. It's the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass. So I've already completed that, and then the next one is Frederick Douglass, My Bondage and My Freedom. And here's this, it's just so amazing. So the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass is from his point of view as a slave. And he wrote that book while he was still enslaved. No, he escaped. He had escaped. He was out of slavery. And when he wrote that book, it was in 1848. And he couldn't tell anybody, like, how there were things that he couldn't say. And also his language skills were different in that book. And then there was a book that he wrote 10 years later after he was freed, and that's the one I'm reading now. And that book is My Bondage and My Freedom. Oh, it's so amazing. So let me tell you, and so as I'm reading this, I feel like I'm going through the journey, but I want to share it with you guys. He talks about a lot of stuff, and it's from the perspective of somebody who was actually slaved. So he said, Miko, well, how can he write a book if he was a slave? Well, let me tell you, he wanted to learn how to read, and he literally tricked people into teaching them how to read. He learned how to read a few letters, and then when he was around some other kids, he like tricked them into teaching him how to read. And then he eventually got to the point where he was able to learn how to read under the guise of learning how to read the Bible. But it's really to hear his story, to hear his challenges, when he talks about his life and how he lived. And keep in mind, Frederick Douglass was half white. So his father was white. And the rumor is that his father was the master, but he says that was never proven. But he talks about like growing up in slavery, growing up where they slept on the floors were dirt floors inside the house. So there were no floors. It was just dirt floors. The food that he eats, he talks about it in very detail. He talks about the rationing of food. So basically, it would give him cornmeal. And I think about like all the things we do with cornmeal, African Americans, the cornbread, the catfish with cornmeal. Cornmeal was one of the main pieces of our diet in slavery. He talks about how the disconnecting of the family. And and when he's talking about the disconnected of the family, it's almost like he's talking about today, but a little bit. Of course, it was much more atrocious back then. So let's say, for instance, mothers were never allowed to raise their own babies because the mothers had to still work in the fields. So you would have a baby, and your baby would be taken away from you. In his situation, the grandmother raised all of her children's kids. But in different situations, it would be different. And so she would raise these kids until there was time for them to go and be slaves. And so I think he went, when he met his cousins, he was about 8 years old. But he talked about just seeing the difference between the ages of birth to 8. He was just a kid, right? He knows the difference between white kids and black kids because he talks about slaves. They received a rationing. So you got a rationing of food, and then you also got a rationing of clothes. So, and that's it. So when the clothes were tattered or torn or something was bad, you just didn't get any more. And so a lot of African American children were naked. You didn't have clothes. You didn't have clothes for your kids, and a lot of the seamstress that, a lot of us people that look like me took that up as a trade because you absolutely had to, right? And he goes and he talks about like his life in such detail that it just brings you in. He's explaining things that I didn't understand about slavery, like what are the difference between a master and an overseer. And he talks about when he went to so he was a fair skinned guy, right? And he had it pretty easy until his master had to break him in. And then he went to work for this guy named Mr. Covey. And he talks about a fight that he had with Mr. Covey. And Mr. Covey, but not until after 6 months, Mr. Covey beat him brutal for 6 months. 6 months he beat him brutal. Now, this is not his picture. This is not the pictures that I'm sharing here of Frederick Douglass. This is just a picture of Frederick Douglass is the first picture, that first little box. And then the second picture is just a slave that's being beat. But in his book, he talks about the blood. It's like when I thought about, the whippings of slaves, I guess I just didn't come to me that it was just blood running down people's backs. And it absolutely was. He talks about it in detail. And even with like this third picture over here, that was just common. It was common for men and women backs to look like that in slavery. And there were some slave masters who were particularly brutal and some who weren't. And it's interesting. In the second book, I'm trying to get to, there were things that they were in fear of. He was in Virginia, or he was in Maryland, and Virginia or Maryland. And I don't want to mess that up, but in New York, there were all these laws, right? And he was afraid of New York because they would send you back. But Pennsylvania, which is where our Constitution, right, was, post Civil War, a lot of stuff happened in Philly and Pennsylvania and Philadelphia had a very important role in all of this. And so I'm just getting to that in his book. So I'm gonna let you know from his perspective, how it went. But it's so when I hear the city of brotherly love, now I'm thinking there's way more to it than what I even thought. And then when it talked about, I gotta go back to the whippings and the beatings, because there is a when you go and you see these things, like when you go to the Washington, D.C., and you go into the African American Museum and you see these artifacts, hearing his book and seeing the artifacts, it kind of connects. Or like I went to Savannah, and there's an African American tour that takes you through a cemetery. And at the cemetery, there's a whipping tree. And this whipping tree is where when they would publicly whip slaves. So slaves would get whipped all the time, for things like if you don't tip a hat to a white person, or if you speak too loudly, or if you appear confident, or if you, let's say it was your job, and he talked about this, something about plowing the oxen, and something breaks and it's your fault and you would get beat, right? But then there was like a level. So you would get beat pretty bad on the plantations, but then there were public squares. And in Savannah, there's this tree where they would take Black people to, and they would beat them. And the thing he describes is they actually tied them to the tree so you couldn't move. So, I mean, that book is just, if you have time or you can get the Audible, I'm actually listening to all of the Audible. So whenever I'm going between here and there, I'm listening to it. So I'm on the My Bondage and Freedom now, which was written 10 years after he was free. And the interesting thing about Frederick Douglass is he talks about you can hear his vocabulary has changed. He's very highly intelligent, and from book to book, as he was able to learn more, and he was just this guy who just wanted to learn so much, and he taught slaves how to read. That's what he did. He taught them how to read, because remember, it was illegal for slaves to learn how to read, because if you knew how to read, then you may want your freedom, and you come off like a person, not a thing. And he talked about how they would sell people's children, just like, we were chattel, right? So cows, people, didn't matter. When there was a will, cows, house, people. It all had to be dealt with, you know, from the will perspective. All had to be in the will. And he was passed down a couple of times, and he tells that story very eloquently. So anyway, so that's my Frederick Douglass update for this week. And I will be sure, as I'm continuing to listen and to this book, to share with you what I'm learning, because it puts slavery in a perspective that we all need to understand. It was not long ago, and that a lot of the issues that we have in our communities, and not just the Black communities, in our communities, because we have to live together, is because of slavery. And if we can understand our past, then we can deal with our past and we can live a better future together. So the last thing, let me see, where am I on time? The last thing I wanted to talk to you guys about was tomorrow in Marion County, there is a school board meeting. It's very important that you go, right? Send somebody in your family. And again, it's not like, you know, we have any action. We just need to be there for our children. There's a lot that's happening at the school board. There's a lot of things that are changing. The children are our future. We cannot sit there and look at these little beautiful babies, feed them, you know, tell them that you love them, and then don't get involved. And all I'm asking you to do is to show up and hear. So the meeting is tomorrow. It's at the school board office on 719 North Main Street in Marion. It starts at 5:30. I should have put the agenda out there, but I'm telling you guys, it don't matter what's on the agenda. We need to make sure somebody in our household is going to those school board meetings every single month. They only meet 11 times a year. That's it. 11 times a year. And the first meeting after this new school year is tomorrow. All right. So with that, I just want to wish you all a very wonderful week. And I thank you for joining. And if you joined on replay, I thank you so much for listening. And I'll see you in those streets. Bye, guys.